Emma Worthington, the only daughter of tech billionaire Gregory Worthington, had always lived in luxury. But one cold winter night, disguised in tattered clothes and clutching a worn-out backpack, she found herself on the streets of New York City. What started as a social experiment to understand the struggles of the less fortunate quickly unraveled secrets about her family that left her shattered. Who was her father, really? And what would she uncover about the life she thought she knew? Emma Worthington was the definition of privilege. Raised in a sprawling mansion on the Upper East Side, she attended the best private schools, wore designer clothes, and jetted off to tropical vacations at a whim. But at 26, Emma felt disconnected. Despite her wealth, her life felt hollow, devoid of purpose. Her father, Gregory Worthington, was a tech mogul revered by the public for his philanthropy, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something about him seemed off. Gregory was a towering figure, both physically and in the business world. His sharp suits, confident stride, and calm demeanor earned him the nickname, the Titan. Yet at home, Gregory was distant. While Emma admired his work ethic, she often felt like a stranger in her own home. She had once overheard staff whispering that Gregory's charm hid a darker side, but she dismissed it as gossip. Their mansion was the epitome of opulence: crystal chandeliers, hand-carved mahogany furniture, and sprawling gardens that rivaled a royal palace. Yet, for all its beauty, it felt like a gilded cage to Emma. Her mother, Margaret, passed away when she was 10, leaving a void that even luxury couldn't fill. Emma spent most of her childhood under the care of nannies and tutors, her father too busy building his empire to notice the loneliness creeping into her heart. One evening, during a charity gala her father hosted, Emma overheard a heated argument between Gregory and one of his board members. "You can't keep hiding it, Greg," the man hissed. "If the truth comes out, it'll ruin you." The words lingered in Emma's mind for days, planting a seed of curiosity and unease. Tired of feeling sheltered and wanting answers, Emma decided to step out of her bubble. Inspired by stories of undercover experiences, she planned a secret experiment: to live as a homeless person for 2 weeks in New York City. She wanted to see the world her father claimed to help through his charitable foundations. Little did she know, this decision would open the door to revelations she wasn't prepared for. The biting cold of December set the stage for Emma's experiment. She swapped her designer wardrobe for thrift store finds and donned a worn-out coat she found in a charity shop. Her golden hair was tucked under a knit cap, and she carried a tattered backpack containing a notebook, a water bottle, and $20 in cash. The streets of New York City bustled with life, yet Emma had never felt more invisible. Rising action. Emma's first night on the streets was a rude awakening. The sidewalks were harsh and unforgiving, with icy wind biting through her layers. She found herself sitting outside a diner, watching well-dressed patrons enjoy warm meals through the frosted glass. Her stomach growled, but she resisted the urge to spend her meager cash, knowing she needed to stretch it for days. A man named Robert, who appeared to be in his mid-50s, approached her that evening. His weathered face and kind eyes revealed a life filled with hardship. "First night out here?" he asked, sitting down beside her. Emma hesitated but nodded. Robert handed her a half-eaten sandwich and a piece of advice. "Trust is hard to come by out here. Keep your head down and don't let anyone take advantage of you." Robert became her guide to life on the streets. He showed her where to find soup kitchens, how to stay safe at night, and which shelters were worth visiting. Through him, Emma learned about the invisible community that existed in the shadows of the city's skyscrapers. Despite their hardships, these people looked out for one another, sharing what little they had. Emma's days were spent observing the city from a perspective she'd never seen before. She noticed the indifference of passers-by, the glares from shopkeepers, and the occasional kindness of strangers who offered her spare change or food. At night, she wrote in her notebook, documenting her experiences and the stories of the people she met. One day, Emma stumbled upon a food distribution event organized by the Worthington Foundation, her father's charity. As she watched volunteers hand out meals, she overheard two staff members arguing. "We don't have enough supplies," one said. "The money from headquarters hasn't come through." Emma's heart sank. She had always believed in her father's philanthropy, but this raised questions about where the money was going. Determined to uncover the truth, Emma decided to dig deeper. She struck up a conversation with a volunteer named Clara, who revealed that funding cuts had severely impacted the Foundation's ability to help those in need. "I admire what Gregory Worthington stands for," Clara said, "but I've heard rumors that not all the donations are going where they should." Emma's world began to crack. Could her father, the man she had idolized despite his flaws, be involved in something unethical? The idea was almost too much to bear, but Emma knew she couldn't ignore it. Her undercover journey took an unexpected turn when she met a young girl named Lily. At just 8 years old, Lily had been living on the streets with her mother after they lost their home. Emma felt an instant connection to the child, who reminded her of herself at that age, curious, hopeful, and longing for stability. Lily's mother, Sarah, shared their story, how they had been evicted after her husband's medical bills piled up, despite applying for aid through a foundation linked to Gregory Worthington's company. Emma decided to take a bold step. She confided in Robert about her true identity, explaining her plan to confront her father about the discrepancies in his foundation. To her surprise, Robert wasn't angry. "If anyone can make him listen, it's you," he said. "But be careful. People like your father don't get to the top without learning how to silence dissent." Emma returned to her father's mansion after 2 weeks on the streets, her disguise now a symbol of the life she had temporarily embraced. Gregory was stunned when she walked into his study, her tattered coat and weary eyes a stark contrast to the luxurious surroundings. "Emma, what on earth are you wearing?" he asked, rising from his desk. "What are you hiding, Dad?" Emma demanded, her voice trembling. "I've seen the people your foundation is supposed to be helping. They're suffering, and I don't think it's because of funding shortages. I think it's because of you." Gregory's face hardened, but he didn't deny her accusation. Instead, he sighed and gestured for her to sit. "You don't understand how the world works, Emma," he said. "Sometimes you have to make compromises to keep things running." "Compromises?" Emma shot back. "Like stealing from the people who need it most. Like letting children like Lily and her mother sleep on the streets while we live in a mansion." The tension between them was palpable. For the first time in her life, Emma saw her father not as a titan of industry, but as a flawed human being who had lost sight of his principles. The confrontation escalated as Emma demanded answers, her voice breaking with frustration and heartbreak. "You've built an empire on the backs of people you claim to help," she said. "If you truly cared, you'd fix this, right now." Gregory's expression shifted from defensive to contemplative. Emma's words had struck a nerve, and for the first time, he seemed to grasp the weight of his actions. Climax Emma's confrontation with her father marked the beginning of a heated exchange, but it was far from the climax. Gregory Worthington, a man who had spent his entire life building a facade of integrity and success, was now facing an unfiltered view of himself through his daughter's eyes. Yet, as Emma demanded answers, Gregory's tone grew cold and dismissive. "You think it's all so simple, don't you?" Gregory snapped, pacing the room. "You waltz in here after a 2-week experiment on the streets, and suddenly you know how the world works. Let me tell you something, Emma. Running a company, running a foundation, it's not black and white. It's survival. Sacrifices have to be made." Emma stood her ground, her voice firm. Sacrifices, like stealing from the very people you're supposed to help. You've turned philanthropy into a sham. Do you even know what's happening on the streets? Have you ever looked into the eyes of the people you're supposed to be saving? They're suffering, Dad, and you're the reason. The words hit Gregory like a sledgehammer, but he refused to show it. You don't know what you're talking about, he muttered, pouring himself a drink. You're young, idealistic. One day you'll understand the compromises it takes to maintain this empire. Emma's frustration boiled over. Then explain Lily and her mother. Explain why your foundation denied them aid while you sit here in this mansion with more money than you could ever spend. Explain why volunteers are begging for resources while you keep making promises you never intend to keep. The mention of Lily brought a flicker of guilt to Gregory's face, but he quickly masked it with deflection. It's complicated, he said. There are processes, systems in place. It's greed, plain and simple, Emma interrupted, her voice rising. You've let greed blind you, and I won't stand by and watch you destroy lives. At that moment, Margaret, the family's longtime housekeeper, entered the room, clearly uncomfortable with the tension but holding a stack of papers. Sir, she said hesitantly, these documents just came. I think Miss Emma should see them. Gregory shot Margaret a sharp look, but Emma snatched the papers before he could protest. Flipping through them, she discovered a series of financial reports that detailed massive misappropriations of foundation funds. The documents traced large sums of money being funneled into private accounts under Gregory's name. Emma's hands trembled as she held the evidence. You lied, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. You lied to the world, to me. Gregory tried to grab the papers, but Emma pulled away. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, he pleaded. These are just safety nets. The foundation is still doing good work. Safety nets? Emma's voice cracked. For who? Yourself. While families like Lily's sleep in shelters and children go hungry, you're building a financial empire on their suffering. How could you? Gregory's silence spoke volumes. For the first time, Emma saw the cracks in her father's armor, the fear and guilt hiding behind his carefully curated facade. But the betrayal was too deep, the damage irreparable. As Emma stormed out of the study, she heard Gregory call after her, but she didn't stop. She needed to clear her head to figure out her next move. But the night had more surprises in store. Walking through the mansion's grand halls, Emma stumbled upon a room she hadn't visited in years, her late mother's library. It was a place of comfort during her childhood, filled with books and memories of Margaret reading to her on rainy days. Emma hesitated, then pushed open the door. The faint scent of lavender lingered in the air, and the sight of her mother's handwritten notes in the margins of books brought tears to her eyes. As she browsed the shelves, Emma's hand brushed against a hidden compartment in the desk. Inside, she found a collection of journals, her mother's journals. Flipping through them, Emma discovered entries that revealed Margaret's suspicions about Gregory's business dealings. One entry in particular stood out. Greg is changing. The man I fell in love with is slipping away. He says it's for the family, for Emma, but I can't ignore the things I've seen. The missing funds, the false reports. If Emma ever finds this, I hope she knows she has the strength to make things right. The revelation hit Emma like a wave. Her mother had known, and she had tried to protect her. The realization gave Emma a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just fighting for Lily or the people her father had wronged. She was fighting for her mother's legacy. Armed with the journals and the financial documents, Emma sought out an ally. She contacted Clara, the volunteer from the food distribution event, and shared what she had discovered. Clara was shocked but supportive. If we expose this, it could change everything, she said. But it won't be easy. Your father has a lot of power. I don't care, Emma replied. "It's time someone stood up to him." Together, they devised a plan to bring the truth to light. Clara connected Emma with investigative journalists who specialized in exposing corporate corruption. Emma provided them with the documents, her mother's journals, and her own testimony from her time on the streets. The journalists were skeptical at first, but the evidence was undeniable. As the investigation gained traction, Gregory's empire began to crumble. News outlets picked up the story, and public outrage grew. Protests erupted outside Worthington Tower, with signs demanding justice for the people Gregory had exploited. Employees at the foundation began coming forward, sharing their own stories of intimidation and cover-ups. Gregory, once untouchable, found himself at the center of a scandal that threatened to destroy everything he had built. But for Emma, it wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability. The climax reached its peak during a live televised interview. Gregory, under pressure from his legal team, agreed to address the allegations. Emma watched from the green room, her heart pounding as her father took the stage. For the first time, he looked vulnerable, his confident demeanor replaced by visible anxiety. When the journalist confronted him with the evidence, Gregory faltered. I made mistakes," he admitted, his voice shaking. "I thought I was protecting my family, but I see now that I lost sight of what really matters." In the audience, Emma felt a mix of anger and pity. Her father's confession was too little, too late, but it was a step toward redemption. The interview ended with Gregory announcing his resignation from the foundation and pledging to return the misappropriated funds. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. Emma's journey had transformed her in ways she never expected. She had gone from a sheltered heiress to a fearless advocate for justice, inspired by the people she met on the streets and the legacy of her mother. As she walked out of the studio that night, she felt a sense of clarity and purpose. Her father's empire had fallen, but Emma knew the fight wasn't over. She vowed to rebuild the foundation from the ground up, ensuring it truly served the people it claimed to help. With Clara by her side and the support of the community, Emma set out to create a future where wealth and power were used for good, not greed. The transformation was complete. Emma Worthington, once defined by her privilege, had become a symbol of hope and resilience. And as she looked up at the night sky, she whispered a silent promise to her mother, "I'll make you proud." Resolution. The aftermath of Emma Worthington's discovery shook her family and the public to their core. For years, the Worthington name had been synonymous with wealth, power, and philanthropy. But the revelations about Gregory Worthington's selfishness, deceit, and negligence brought a reckoning no one had anticipated. Emma's decision to disguise herself and live among the people her family's foundation was supposed to help had not only exposed her father's actions, but also ignited a transformation that extended far beyond their family. Gregory Worthington's resignation as the CEO of the Worthington Foundation marked the beginning of a long and painful journey of accountability. Public backlash was fierce, with headlines condemning his actions and former allies distancing themselves from him. The board of directors swiftly replaced him, but it was Emma's determination to rebuild the foundation that became the focal point of public attention. For Gregory, life after the resignation was isolating. He retreated to a modest countryside property, far from the grandeur of the Worthington estate. Without the constant distractions of wealth and power, he was forced to confront the life he had built and the people he had hurt. Emma's mother's journal, which Emma had found during her time disguised as a homeless woman, became Gregory's constant companion. Her words of love, disappointment, and hope forced him to reflect deeply on the choices that had led him to this moment. One passage stood out to Gregory. "Greg, we built this foundation to give others the chances we were given. Don't let success blind you to what really matters. Haunted by those words, Gregory decided to take the first step toward redemption. He began volunteering anonymously at a homeless shelter, serving meals and listening to the stories of those who had been directly affected by the very system he had failed to protect. It was humbling, but for Gregory, it was also healing. Though he knew he could never fully undo the harm he had caused, he was determined to spend the rest of his life trying. While her father grappled with his fall from grace, Emma embraced the challenge of restoring the Worthington Foundation's reputation. She took over as the new CEO, but she was determined to do things differently. Her first move was to dissolve the old board of directors and replace them with individuals who shared her vision of transparency, integrity, and genuine compassion. Clara, the volunteer who had helped Emma during her time living as a homeless woman, became one of her most trusted advisors. Together, they began the painstaking process of rebuilding the foundation from the ground up. Emma's experiences during her time, disguised as a homeless woman, shaped every decision she made. She had seen firsthand how the foundation's resources had failed to reach those who needed them most. To address this, she implemented sweeping changes to ensure that funds were allocated efficiently and equitably. Community councils were established to give a voice to the people the foundation served, and transparency reports were published quarterly to show exactly how donations were being used. One of Emma's most impactful initiatives was the creation of a new program specifically for families like Lily's, the young girl Emma had befriended while living on the streets. The program provided housing, education, and job training for single mothers and their children, helping them break the cycle of poverty. Lily's mother, who was a talented seamstress, was hired to lead a vocational training program, while Lily received a full scholarship to attend a prestigious school. The day Lily graduated from primary school, she wrote Emma a heartfelt letter. "You changed our lives. One day, I want to help people the way you helped us." Under Emma's leadership, the Worthington Foundation became a symbol of hope and redemption. The lavish galas that once catered to the wealthy elite were replaced with community celebrations that were free and open to everyone. Donors were encouraged to engage directly with the communities they supported, fostering a sense of connection and shared purpose. The Foundation's new motto, "Building Futures Together," reflected Emma's commitment to collaboration and inclusivity. It wasn't just about writing checks, it was about creating lasting change by empowering individuals and communities. This approach resonated with people around the world, and the Foundation quickly regained its credibility and influence. Emma's story caught the attention of the media, and she was invited to speak at conferences and panels on ethical leadership and social justice. She used these opportunities to challenge other wealthy families and corporations to take a hard look at their own practices. "Philanthropy isn't about making yourself look good," she said during one particularly powerful speech. "It's about making life better for others. If your giving doesn't do that, then you're doing it wrong." Her words struck a chord, and soon other organizations began adopting similar transparency and accountability measures. Emma's story became a movement, inspiring people from all walks of life to take action in their own communities. Despite her professional success, Emma's relationship with her father remained strained. Though she admired his efforts to seek redemption, the wounds of betrayal ran deep. It wasn't until Emma visited the homeless shelter where Gregory volunteered that she began to see a glimmer of hope for their relationship. When she arrived, she found Gregory quietly serving meals to a line of people, his once impeccable suit replaced with a simple apron. He looked up in surprise when he saw her, but there was no trace of the arrogance he once carried. "You're doing good work here," Emma said, her voice soft but cautious. "I'm trying," Gregory replied, his voice heavy with emotion. "I know it'll never be enough, but it's a start." They sat together after the meal service, talking for the first time in months. Gregory apologized, not just for his actions, but for the years he had put his ambition above his family. Emma didn't forgive him right away, but the conversation marked a turning point. Over time, their shared commitment to helping others brought them closer, and they began to rebuild their relationship. The Worthington Foundation's transformation had ripple effects far beyond Emma and her family. Programs like the one that helped Lily and her mother became blueprints for similar initiatives across the country. Communities that had once been neglected began to thrive, thanks to the Foundation's renewed focus on empowerment and equity. Emma also continued to work closely with Clara, whose perspective as someone who had experienced homelessness firsthand was invaluable. Together, they launched a mentorship program that paired individuals transitioning out of homelessness with volunteers who could provide guidance and support. The program became one of the Foundation's most successful initiatives, with countless participants finding stable jobs, housing, and a renewed sense of purpose. One particularly memorable success story was that of Marcus, a young man Emma had met during her time disguised as a homeless woman. Marcus had been living on the streets after losing his job and struggling with addiction, but with the Foundation's support, he was able to turn his life around. He later became a counselor, helping others navigate the same challenges he had faced. Emma often reflected on the lessons she had learned throughout her journey. She realized that true leadership wasn't about power or prestige. It was about humility, empathy, and the willingness to listen. Her time living as a homeless woman had shown her the resilience and strength of people who were often overlooked, and she was determined to honor their stories in everything she did. One of her favorite quotes, which she often shared during her speeches, was from her mother's journal. "True wealth isn't measured by what you have, it's measured by what you give." Those words became her guiding principle, shaping not only her work with the Foundation, but also her personal values. As Emma stood on the stage at the Foundation's annual community celebration, she looked out at the crowd and saw faces that represented every part of her journey. Lily and her mother, Clara, Marcus, and even her father. She took a deep breath and began her speech. "We all have the power to make a difference," she said. "It doesn't matter how much money you have or where you come from. What matters is your willingness to see the humanity in others and to take action. Together, we can build a better future for everyone." The crowd erupted into applause, but Emma's focus wasn't on the noise. It was on the hope and determination she saw in the eyes of the people around her. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was truly living up to her family's legacy. Not the one built on wealth and status, but the one built on love, compassion, and the desire to make the world a better place. As the event came to a close, Emma joined the crowd, laughing and celebrating alongside the people whose lives had inspired her journey. It wasn't the end of her story, it was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, purpose, and the belief that even the smallest actions could spark extraordinary change.